Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
that in 2022, we got this done.
Mayor Lightfoot shows her card, selecting Bally's casino proposal. A look at the potential financial impact on the city.
We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses.
The Federal Reserve announces its biggest rate hike in more than 20 years in an effort to combat inflation.
The state's Director of Children and Family Services responds to criticism his office isn't doing enough to place children in the state's care.
He was all alone. He died all alone.
A scathing audit finds the Pritzker administration failed to address a COVID outbreak in a state veterans home.
The street just was not developed.
From historic preservation to adaptation, we have a live report from the Old Town neighborhood.
I'm Angelito, and coming up tonight, we take you to a groundbreaking ceremony for a new Arts Incubator headed to Greater Grand Crossing.
Swimmers and meteorologists have a new set of eyes monitoring Lake Michigan. Meet Chewy the buoy.
And Brandis and Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Old Town as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, this neighborhood is an area that has undergone a lot of change during the past decade. Local residents have fought to preserve historic buildings in the area. Now, we check in with the few staples in the community and speak with the youth-focused organization working on serving underserved youth. But first, I send it back to you.
Joanna, thank you. Now to some of today's top stories. U.S. markets fell sharply, marking their worst day of the year. All of Wednesday's gains, after the Federal Reserve announced it would raise interest rates, were erased by midday, and markets only got worse from there. The Dow dropped more than 3%. The S&P 500 fell 3.5%. The Nasdaq Composite tumbled 5%, its worst day since 2020. Global defense contractor Boeing is taking off from Chicago and moving its headquarters to Washington, D.C. The company confirmed the move today, putting executives closer to their biggest customer, the Pentagon, as well as the Federal Aviation Administration, which certifies Boeing passenger jets. The company set up headquarters here in 2001 and has 142,000 global employees, 12% of whom are based outside the United States. In a statement, Mayor Lightfoot says the city still has a robust pipeline of major corporate relocations and expansions to announce in the coming months. And Divvy bike riders will be charged up to here. The city has installed the nation's first 5 electrified charging stations. The new stations, seen here around the city, will be able to charge the new Lyft e-bike model, which was introduced last December. The city and the company say the stations will make the e-bike more available for riders and also reduce the greenhouse gas emissions associated with operating the Divvy fleet, since fewer vehicle miles will need to be driven to manually swap out batteries. Divvy says it plans to expand service to all areas of the city later this year. Up next, now that the mayor has selected a casino proposal, what does that mean for city finances? Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Lori Lightfoot is placing a high-stakes bet selecting Bally's casino proposal in the city's River West neighborhood. Officials consider the gaming palace and entertainment district key to the city's financial future. The visibly excited mayor announced her pick in front of a crowd of thrilled union members this morning.
30 years and 2 mayors later, I'm pleased to announce that in 2022, we got this done.
And WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with a look at Lightfoot's decision to go all in and what it could mean for the city's finances and the mayor's all-but-announced re-election campaign. And as the mayor mentioned, Heather, this was something Mayors Daley and Emanuel tried to get done. The day is finally here, kind of. Remind us what the Bally's proposal includes.
Well, it is a $1.73 billion proposal that would build a casino with 3,400 slot games, 173 table games, a concert venue, an event space, 6 restaurants, a food hall, and an extension of the Chicago Riverwalk, all on what is now the Chicago Tribune printing plant and newsroom in the River West neighborhood, which will transform, if built, that part of the city.
And Mayor Lightfoot told you she picked Bally's because it was the most lucrative for the city. Let's take a listen.
It was very important to me that we had a financial deal that worked for the city.
So does this all but solve the city's fiscal issues, Heather?
Well, it definitely will help. The Bally's Casino is expected to ring up $192 million in its sixth year of operation for the city in tax revenue alone. In addition, Bally's agreed to give the city $40 million once it signs the agreement after it's approved by the Illinois Gaming Board, and the casino operators will give the city $4 million a year to help defray the cost that the casino is going to have on the city's operations and infrastructure. All of that revenue is earmarked for the city's police and fire pension funds, which, of course, as you know, Paris, is just a huge burden on the city's budget, and it threatens its financial stability.
And certainly those funds have been beleaguered for many years, and Lightfoot will need the support of not only the Chicago City Council, but also the Illinois Gaming Board. Let's listen to what she said when asked whether she has those votes.
But I'm more than confident that we will have a good, solid majority that says yes.
Heather, there's some older people out there that beg to differ. Does she have the votes?
Well, she has perhaps the most crucial vote on the city council. Alongside her this morning was Alderman Walter Burnett. The casino will be built in his 27th ward. Now, he said that he isn't necessarily thrilled with the casino, but he is happy to vote for it if it means that property taxes don't have to rise. Now, the mayor formed a special city council committee to consider the casino. That committee will meet on Monday. What's interesting is that agenda says it will consider all three finalists for the Chicago casino, even though the mayor made her pick today. And that has raised a great deal of frustration among some older people, including Alderman Brendan Riley and Alderman Brian Hopkins, who have the wards adjoining this area, and they are vehemently opposed to this proposal.
So, Heather, you mentioned that meeting next Monday, which was supposed to consider all the proposals. Does this mean the other two proposals really are done or still have some kind of fighting chance?
Well, both Rush Street Gaming and Hard Rock Casino issued statements today congratulating Bally's and wishing the city well. So it certainly appears that they have tossed in the proverbial towel, which is going to make it really difficult for people to convince the city council to reject this proposal, because if it's this casino or no casino, there's going to be a lot of pressure on members of the city council to approve this deal because of just the massive amount of money at stake here.
All right. Big day, Heather. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And now to Brandis and the head of an embattled state agency. Brandis.
Paris, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services is under scrutiny for a host of reasons. Since December, at least 5 children who've been in contact with the agency have died. House Republicans are calling for an audit, and the agency's own director, Mark Smith, has been held in contempt of court 9 times. That's because there is a court docket of children in the state's care and in need of placement. Instead, the kids have been remaining in hospitals because DCFS hasn't been able to place them. So here to talk about how he plans to address these problems is Mark Smith, director of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Director, thank you for joining us. We should also mention that of those 9 times that you've been held in contempt of court, 3 of them have been purged, including 1 today. But it's about children who are still living in psychiatric hospitals, even though medical professionals have cleared them for release. What's happening here? Why are so many children still being held in these hospitals and not being placed?
So thank you for having me today. And first of all, I'd like to say how much I appreciate being here and how much I appreciate being able to be in the role of leading DCFS and supporting the children and families that we serve. When we talk about kids who are in psychiatric hospitals and when they are granted release from the medical professionals, what has to be made clear is that it doesn't mean that those children are ready for discharge immediately. It means that they are now on the pathway to being released. Those children are in the care of DCFS, and we have worked hard to ensure that we find those most safe, appropriate placements for those children. Of the 20,000+ children we have in care, at any given time, about 35 of those kids have been registered as being prepared and ready for discharge planning from psych hospitals, and DCFS works aggressively to get those kids placed. We're very happy with our progress with working with our residential partners in the community throughout the state of Illinois who have worked hard at developing beds and appropriate resources for those children. And about a third of the children that come out of beyond medical necessity environments of psych hospitals go back to the community from which they came. And so we've worked very hard to develop beds and foster homes and to support parents and families in getting those children placed in their homes.
And to be clear, it sounds like we're talking about a minority of the children in your care, 35 who are ready for discharge and for whom that planning needs to happen. But it sounds like obviously some of them are still not being released from those medical facilities. What is the plan for establishing some sort of other shelter, some other placement for those children?
So currently we are working directly with residential providers across the state of Illinois, and we are also working with providers across the country to develop the appropriate resources for these children. The thing that we have to remember that these children all have very unique psychiatric, behavioral, and medical needs. And because they are so unique, it takes time to develop the specific resources for those children. So for example, we have children who have suicidal and homicidal ideations that are actively dealing with psychotic ideations and also have severe medical issues. And because those very unique set of circumstances, it becomes important for us to take the time to develop a very specific type of placement for those children. We do have very good partners across the state who are slowly but surely developing those services for those kids. We have added, in the last 2 weeks, frankly, we have added 16 new residential beds that we are placing children in. This calendar year, we've added 37 new beds. And over the last year or so, we've added 90+ new beds, therapeutic beds for these children. We are on track to add another 74 beds within the next 6 to 12 months. So we're very excited that we are making very aggressive progress in negotiating these resources for the kids that we serve.
Director, so in December, at least, as we mentioned earlier, 5 children who've been in contact with your agency have died. An investigator as well, Deidre Silas, was murdered earlier this year. House Republicans in Springfield are calling for an audit. And even the National Association of Social Workers Illinois chapter has asked for your removal. Director, you've been on the job for 3 years. How do you respond to all of this?
So nothing is, it's more important to us than the safety of the children and families that we serve and the staff that go out and support these children. It is important for us to remember that DCFS plays a role in supporting families that are in tragedy, that our investigators, our social workers who go out and try to help families make the best decisions and connect to the most resources and support that they can. We work arm in arm with local law enforcement, with local state's attorneys, and to try to make the best decisions we can for families. We know that it's important for our staff to be vigilant and diligent in the way they make decisions. We support them aggressively with policy and training, and it's our expectation that they do the best they can, and we support them in good decision making.
Now, Director, we've talked a bit about the beds that you've been able to add in the Rauner administration. We know that DCFS lost 500 placement beds. Here's Cook County Public Guardian Charles Goldberg on replacing those.
It doesn't really take years to rebuild bed capacity. There's short term, there's medium term, and there's long term. In the short term, again, there are beds right now in existing placements that are empty. But the placements don't have enough money to to pay the staff that they need, to hire the staff that they need, and fully staff the beds that exist. That can be addressed in the near to short-term run.
So, Director, is that right? Is it just a matter of space, or is it a matter of the money to hire the staff to operate the space? Because having lost 500 beds, the number of beds that it sounds like that you've added recently is not enough to make up for that.
So the truth is that we always have to remember there are no simple explanations and no simple options to any of the work that we do in child welfare. In the last 3 years, DCFS has been very fortunate to have an administration and legislators who have increased the budget for our residential programs by more than 58%. That money is being spent directly to provide the increased capacity for the children we have. You cannot correct a system that has been depleted for many years overnight, but we have made tremendous progress. Okay. Not only have we increased the number of beds, but the quality of the services that are delivered to these children, because these are children who have very, very high-end needs. The quality of these beds, the quality of our providers has improved. We have worked very hard to help our providers hire more staff. We have raised the minimum starting salary from $12 an hour, $9 to $12 an hour a few years ago, to upward of $19 an hour. Okay. And so those resources are absolutely helpful.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it, Director. I wish we had more time to talk. Director Mark Smith of DCFS, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Old Town is a neighborhood nestled within Chicago's near North Side community. It's a historic district filled with Victorian-era buildings and stories of German immigrants who settled there in the 19th century. The demographic has changed over time, but it still holds the charm with its architecture and classic comedy clubs. As part of our Chicago Tonight In Your Neighborhood series, reporter Joanna Hernandez and producer Acacia Hernandez spent the day in Old Town, and Joanna joins us now from where else? St. Michael's Church. Joanna.
Now, Paris, this is one of the few buildings that survived the Chicago fire, and you'll hear about that more in just a bit. But first, we started by visiting the Chicago History Museum on Clark Street to learn more about the area's origin. The neighborhood was first home to Native American tribes, and in the 1840s and 50s, Germans settled in the area and began to farm and build. John Russick, the senior vice president of the museum, told us more about the neighborhood's transition.
There were Germans here that had quite a bit of agricultural activity going on, and they were on the edge of the city, so there were different sort of organizational issues related to how that community was formed at the time. But eventually the property got, really valuable, and, farm isn't necessarily the kind of thing that you're going to see, spread out inside urban limits. So, they sort of got moved on and sort of changed the character as it became more residential over time.
Because of those German farmers and the land they once had, Old Town was nicknamed Cabbage Patch. Russick says the area has always been a largely white neighborhood, but lots of communities have called the area home. Art and entertainment play a huge role in the neighborhood. In fact, Second City and Zany's Comedy Club have been staples in the community for decades. Brian Hicks, the general manager of Zany's, spoke with us about the comedy club making its mark for 44 years, and anyone from Jay Leno, Eddie Murphy, Dave Chappelle have performed there. The pandemic was tough for business, but as city regulations ease, Hicks says it's been exciting to host a full capacity show.
This space is great because we're obviously it's not a huge club. It is the only remaining comedy club that started back in the boom. It's narrow. People who come here and perform here, they just love the space. Everything's right in front of you, and very manageable, and it's great for Old Town. It's a perfect staple.
Throughout the years, new restaurants and shops have made a home in the neighborhood, but there's still a few bars and restaurants that continue to hold the essence of the old times. One of those is Topo Gigio on Wells Street. Brothers Frank and Tom Rita share the family restaurant was opened by their late father 33 years ago. When the restaurant opened, they recall that the corridor was not developed, and since then the neighborhood has become younger.
A lot of vacant lots on the street. There was several restaurants that were here for a long time. Only two of them are left now, us and Fireplace Inn. And it was a little bit older of a clientele. The surrounding neighborhood was quite different as well. You had Cabrini Green about half a mile away. Then you had the neighborhood on the north side.
There were a lot of hippies around back then, too.
You heard one of the brothers mention Cabrini Green, and even though that complex was demolished, there's still affordable housing complexes in Old Town, like Marshall Field Garden Apartments. We met Adam Aluka, founder of a nonprofit Youth for a Better Future, who seeks to meet the needs of underserved youth in the area. He serves more than 100 kids from nearby schools. The program offers mentoring, community work, and STEM support. He says one of his biggest challenges has been obtaining funds to help in the area.
First of all, I would encourage more collaboration, and I think that is a support of gentrification. If we're able to find ways to work together, it can make the process a lot easier and less difficult for a lot of people. We need more resources. We need more. Volunteers are great, but it takes resources to be able to empower people. As I mentioned earlier, if parents are working, how do you provide educational support for kids when there's very few supporters?
Now I want to take you back to St. Michael's Catholic Church, a pillar in the community. The walls of the parish and the bell tower survived the Chicago fire. We're told the community worked together to rebuild the structure of the church to what it is today. The church director of liturgy and music says Old Town is a transiting community for its younger residents, resulting in more weddings and funerals.
Outskirts of the city, you have a lot of funerals. We have a lot of weddings here, a lot of weddings. And so it's a different dynamic as far as even parish activities. We have between 80 and about 110 weddings.
As you heard, the neighborhood is home to a large population of younger professionals, but there's still residents who call this home for decades. Now, coming up, we'll speak to the local alderwoman, but first, I send it back to you.
All right, Joanna, thanks so much. And there's more Chicago Tonight ahead, so please stay with us.
Thousands of Puerto Ricans are taking to the streets to protest massive blackouts.
Over the years, Mexican culture, from food to music, has become woven into the city's tapestry.
Medical professionals share the latest recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots.
DACA recipients have been facing longer delays than normal in their status renewal.
Little Village is one of my favorite neighborhoods. This neighborhood comes together to celebrate such an important day in our culture.
After being closed for more than 20 years, a former Catholic school in Greater Grand Crossing is being rebuilt into a new Arts Incubator for the Rebuild Foundation. Arts correspondent Angel Ito takes us to that groundbreaking for an inside look at the city's newest cultural hub.
The space was really sophisticated, and I think with the work of Powers & Sons, we'll be able to restore this building, this part of the auditorium, and make it really beautiful.
In about a year's time, this space will soon be transformed into this. It's all a part of Rebuild Foundation's newest venture, rebuilding the former St. Lawrence School into a one-of-a-kind arts incubator.
The abandoned school building I'm currently standing in will eventually offer art studios, co-working spaces, and classrooms that will offer education on financial literacy.
Rebuild Foundation founder Theaster Gates says it's imperative that artists' minds are not only fostered creatively, but through an educational component as well.
Black and brown people, we spend a lot of time being the talent for other infrastructural houses that then take our talent and do great things with our talent. But is it possible for us to build the houses that our talent lives in? And so part of what we want to do is continue to develop the talent part, but also equip people with the tools so that if they wanted to start an LLC or an S-Corp, or if they needed legal advice as they grow, that we would be with them every step of the way with that growth until they don't need us anymore.
One of their newest donors agrees.
People come, learn a skill, learn a craft, stay within the community. They become entrepreneurs themselves, and that has a compounding effect on the community, both culturally as well as economically.
One of the artists who will utilize this new resource is furniture designer Norman Teague. He's one of many artists selected to be a part of a new cohort in collaboration with the Prada Group and Theastergate's Dorchester Industries.
That's one of the proudest moments in my career. To be aligned and working with these people, it's the most gratifying thing I could ask for as a designer. It's just, it just gives me the freedom to, can I flap my wings on WTTW?
Teague has been disrupting spaces and manipulating wood and other inanimate objects for more than 20 years. This new collaboration will allow him to not only grow as an artist, but help the next generation of artists grow as well.
I think the exposure that I will get will be the influence for the next young black designer who sees that it is okay, who sees that you can flap your wings, who sees that you can do things outside of the norm.
This preparation for the next generation is a mission not just of Teague's, but it's also Gates' mission with the Dorchester Design Lab, this new incubator, and all of his other entities as a whole.
Because it's down the street from the Stony Island Arts Bank, down the street from the studio, a block away from the houses that will also be artist housing, that it feels like we're in the beginning of the creation of a pretty sophisticated cultural district. One big hope that Rebuild has is to model what cultural leadership looks like and then what a cultural hub could look like so that we don't have to do it in 77 neighborhoods around the city. We could do it well here and then use what we've done here as a model that could impact the cultural leaders in other cities around the world.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Programming for the Developing Arts Incubator is scheduled to begin in the fall of 2023. And now, Paris, back to you.
All right, Brennis, thanks very much. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, financial analysts weigh in on the historic interest rate hike by the Federal Reserve and its potential impact on consumers. An organization fights to preserve the relics of Old Town. That and more from our In Your Neighborhood series. 36 residents of the LaSalle Veterans Home died in a COVID outbreak. An independent report shows a series of failures by the state to stop the spread. And how Lake Michigan's newest buoy, nicknamed Chewy, will help monitor water and weather conditions and keep swimmers safe. But for some more of today's top stories, a down day on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled more than 1,000 points after closing up more than 900 yesterday. Investors attribute the sell-off today to yesterday's announcement of the Fed raising interest rates by a half a percentage point, as well as concerns about a potentially shrinking economy. NASDAQ also lost 5% of its value today, and we'll have much more on all of this and the rate hike in just a few moments. A new study out of Northwestern says it has found a potential way to root out police misconduct. The study published today found that police misconduct is often, quote, a group phenomenon, and that leads to a disproportionately high number of arrests in minority communities. The study found that crews tied to police misconduct accounted for a disproportionately high amount of use of force complaints and police-involved shootings. The study's authors suggested using this statistical model to help root out police officers that might be engaging in misconduct, but the study stressed that there are limitations to that model. A somewhat brighter outlook on Illinois' fiscal front. Credit ratings agency Fitch upgraded state debt to BBB+, reflecting an improvement in fiscal performance and tax revenue. However, BBB is still considered junk bond status. Fitch's move follows similar reports from other ratings agencies like Moody's and S&P. And as we mentioned earlier, stocks took a big stumble today, one day after the Fed announced the biggest interest rate hike in 22 years. Here's Fed Chairman Jerome Powell talking about that move yesterday.
Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing, and we're moving expeditiously to bring it back down. We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses.
And here to discuss how this move could affect the economy and your wallet going forward are Carola Friedman, finance professor at the Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management, and Susan Schmidt, head of U.S. equities for Aviva Investors. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight. Carola Friedman, half a percentage point, is that the right amount at the right time?
Well, it's the right time. Whether it's the right amount or not, that's really, really hard to say. So is it right? Is it the right move that the Fed increase rates? Yes. We're seeing a time in which the economy has recovered quite a bit, but we're seeing inflation rates that as high as we haven't seen in the last 4 decades. So increasing interest rates is a way to try to tame in inflation rates, and that's an important move. Whether they've done the right amount, well, probably we're going to see further increases down the line.
Time will tell on that. Susan Schmidt, can this stanch the rising tide of inflation just a little bit? Susan, I think you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry, Paris.
There
it
we
will
go.
have an impact for sure. This is certainly going to impact the markets. You've seen that in the market reaction both yesterday and today. And I think it will offset some of that increase in inflation. Remember that a lot of inflation has been driven by supply shortages that have resurrected because of COVID. Now they're straightening out, but actually coming back. We might see more of them with concerns about China doing shutdowns again. But we're also seeing concerns about energy prices. Food and fuel have both gone up. Those contribute to inflation greatly. And so there is concern. Investors are watching this attentively. And I think that increase in interest rates thus far initially met investors' expectations, and it should help over the long run.
Carola Friedman, Susan mentioned the market reaction. It was positive yesterday. It wasn't so positive today. The markets don't like moves like this, but they do respect certainty. So what's the long-term outlook here with the markets?
Well, the markets do go up and down, and I think they went up yesterday because the increase in rates was lower than what some people actually expected. Some people were expected a 75 basis points increase, and we got 0.5%. And there was some reassurance that we're not going to see rate increases as high as 0.75 percentage point going forward. But that was a very short-lived reaction. And I think what done in today is that we will see further increases, and that what the Fed is doing is trying to walk the tightrope between economic growth and inflation by slowly increasing rates as opposed to doing one really large increase now.
All right, so Susan Schmidt, for the viewers out there that want to know how this is going to affect the mortgage they may be seeking or credit card debt, what's your response to them?
Well, mortgages are going to get more expensive. Rates are going up, and the same thing for charges on your credit card debt. So recognize that we are in an uphill rate environment now. We haven't seen that in a very long time. So this is a new thing for a lot of market participants. What it does mean is that the markets also, the stock markets, are going to continue to come under pressure. And so this is leading to a lot of volatility. We saw this amazing whipsaw in returns between yesterday and today. And I think that consumers need to be aware of that. Savers and investors need to be aware of that. Volatility is here, and you're in a new dynamic, one that you haven't seen in more than a decade.
And Carola Friedman, you mentioned the future actions possibly coming from the Fed. Should they hold off given the volatility here, or is it kind of a foregone conclusion that we will see these future moves?
No, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think what the Fed is doing is waiting and seeing as more data comes in. And I completely agree with Susan that we are at a time of extreme uncertainty. And it's not only the supply chain dislocations, but also the Ukrainian-Russian conflict puts a lot of pressure on energy prices. And how fast or how long those two issues take to resolve it's really very much going to impact the period in which the upward pressure on prices is there. So the Fed is probably going to act if they see inflation stay relatively high.
And Susan Schmidt, put this into perspective for us. Folks might worry about what their rates are going to be, but it's not much compared to what they were 40 years ago.
Oh my gosh, it's definitely not much compared to what they were 40 years ago. The problem is most of the market participants now don't have that comparison ready at hand and haven't experienced it. So rates overall are still very low. 2 decades ago, it was not unusual at all to get a high single digit, mid-single digit interest rate, and mortgage rates double digits for some in the last, certainly in my lifetime. Today's Generation X millennials have no concept of that. So it's still relatively very low interest rates. Housing is still very affordable, but there's a sticker shock impact when it was 0% for a very long time. To have interest rates suddenly go up from there certainly has an emotional response in the market. It makes people back off on their purchases initially.
And Carola Friedman, we saw that surprising first quarter report showing a little bit of contraction, worries about a recession. Do you think those worries are founded, and how might that affect future Fed action?
Well, I think we have to look at what components of GDP actually drove the downturn in the first quarter. And some of them are less concerning than others. I think a lot of them still had to do with COVID dislocations. We saw a very big increase in GDP last year. But that is another indicator that I think the Fed is waiting and seeing how the economy is moving to decide how aggressive they're going to be with interest rates, because whenever they increase interest rates, that has a contractionary effect on consumption and investment. And what the Fed doesn't want to do is increase interest rates so much that they trigger an excessive response, and that leads to a recession. But it's a very tight rope to walk.
Certainly a very delicate balance. All right, we thank you two for walking that tightrope with us tonight. Our thanks to Carola Friedman and Susan Schmidt.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Thank you, Paris. Now to Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day in Old Town as a part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Thanks, Brandis. We're now here with Alderwoman Michelle Smith of the 43rd Ward and chair of the City Council's Ethics Committee. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for joining us in beautiful Old Town.
I love it. So the first question is, how would you say Old Town has changed since your time as Alderwoman?
Oh, well, we've had a big turnover of population. We have so many more young families that are deciding to stay in the city, to raise their children. And so it's led to a huge increase in our school population, and we couldn't be more delighted to see all the strollers and buggies and kids on our playgrounds. That's really been the biggest change.
Now, another question that I have, a concern that I kept hearing from residents was the uprise in crime, not only in the neighborhood, but in surrounding neighborhoods. What would you say your office is doing to address this?
Oh, well, of course, public safety is the most important thing an alderman can work on. And we have been very proactive, and the Old Town Triangle is a wonderful partner to us. In fact, we're actually having a safety meeting with the Triangle next week to address people's concerns. And the outcome of our huge amount of citizen involvement is that we have been very active in helping to reduce our own crime rates here in the 43rd Ward.
Now, your new ethics proposal suggests raising the maximum fine for violating the city's ethics ordinance from $5,000 to $20,000. Why was this important to you?
Well, that's among the changes that we're making. The number one thing that we're doing is tightening up ethics reform to end the I got a guy mentality of old Chicago. And that really means that we're tightening up on conflict of interests between people who are city employees and public officials who want their relatives to benefit from their city office. And we're making those rules extremely stringent.
And what are the next steps for this proposal?
Well, we're briefing some of the aldermen tomorrow about it, and then I hope to have a committee meeting as soon as I can, and I expect it to pass.
Now, I want to change it for a little bit. There's a large population of people who live in affordable housing in the community. How has your office seek to serve and support this part of Old Town?
Yes, well, we have actually over 1,500 units of affordable housing in the 43rd Ward. That's higher than many, many communities on the north side. And we're very involved with doing everything from helping our aging seniors to actually working with Ademekula, who you talked to earlier, in trying to improve the educational attainment of people who have less advantage than some of our other residents, because they all go to Lincoln Park High School, which is the most diverse high school in the city, and we want to make sure that everyone can excel there.
And there's 3 schools in the area, I think he mentioned, that he serves.
He serves Menier, Jenner, and I guess maybe Franklin Fine Arts, which is not literally in my ward, but Munir and Jenner the kids from that school end up coming to Lincoln Park High School. And we want to make sure that every child that comes to that high school is well prepared so they can go to college if they choose.
So there's a lot of work that your office is doing.
We are working, and we're going to be encouraging our neighbors to join in that activity.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It was great to be here.
Now, coming up, you'll hear from another organization, and we talk about a historic art fair. But first, I send it back to you.
Joanna, thanks. We'll see you in a bit. Up next, a scathing audit on a COVID outbreak in a state veterans home. But first, a look at the weather.
The Illinois Department of Public Health became a trusted source for many throughout the pandemic, but a new report from the state's Auditor General finds that IDPH neglected to respond to a COVID outbreak at a state-run veterans home until for many, it was too late. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the story. Amanda.
There we go. Sorry, Paris. 36 residents did, in fact, of that LaSalle Veterans Home did die in November 2020 as a result of that outbreak. And one of them was Richard Susky. His wife had visited Richard every day at the home from 9:30 until 2, dining with him and his pals, until the pandemic hit, when suddenly visits were not allowed. Daughter Leslie Lamb says then the family started visiting Richard at his window. Not ideal, she says, but it was for everyone's safety.
It was just really weird. And, you try to explain to them, no, we're just outside plexiglass, and then they can't hear because you got a mask on. I mean, you're talking to someone that has hard of hearing and then in a mask. It was just a nightmare, but it was good to see his face and to see him glow when he looks at us. So, it was worth just to see his face through the dirty window.
The family was impressed that even as COVID hit other congregate settings, LaSalle stayed safe. But 8 months into the pandemic, it surged through the home. Her dad, all of those lunch pails, they got COVID. She recalls the last time her family visited, Lamb brought Windex so she could see her father better.
After we all said our goodbyes through the window, it was like he was waiting for all of us to come and say goodbye because he passed away that night. So he went from being semi-okay to on his deathbed in a matter of hours. That's how quickly that happened. And then my dad was gone.
A new investigation by the state's independent Auditor General, that's former Democratic State Representative Frank Montino, details how the state responded, or more precisely, how the state did not respond, at least not right away.
What is very troubling for me is that the governor, this administration, and the Department of Public Health waited almost 12 days before they arrived on site to see what was happening in the home. Had they arrived on the site at the first onset of an outbreak, November 1st, they could have slowed the outbreak.
State Senator Sue Rezin represents the area where the LaSalle Veteran Home is, and she says that whistleblowers had called her talking about problems at the home. There were no masks, procedures not being followed. By the time that IDPH visited, 83 residents had contracted COVID and 11 had died. The 154-page audit slams the Pritzker administration, saying that although the Illinois Department of Public Health officials were informed of the increasing positive cases almost on a daily basis by the Department of Veterans Affairs Chief of Staff, IDPH did not identify and respond to the seriousness of the outbreak. Now, the audit also takes umbrage with a previous report on the situation that was ordered by Governor Pritzker that was focused on the Veterans Affairs Department, saying the scope of that audit was narrow and that his primary finding was flawed. Pritzker today says that he did take action upon learning of the situation and ended up firing the director of the Veterans Affairs Agency. He says at the time of the outbreak, the state was fighting an uphill battle to stop COVID spread.
And you may remember this is before we had vaccines. We were working against Republican elected officials who told people to defy mitigation efforts. We told people that they needed to follow those mitigations, but Republicans told them that they need not wear masks. They told people that they didn't need to get vaccinated. They told people that COVID wasn't serious. Those lies put people's lives at risk, especially the most vulnerable, even as my team and I worked 18 hours a day for 9 months straight to fight them.
But those who want to replace Pritzker as governor say that he shoulders the blame, especially after Pritzker won office by blasting his predecessor, Governor Bruce Rauner, for failures to manage an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at the Quincy Veterans Home that killed 14 residents there.
When you're governor, the buck stops with you. My heart is breaking for these veterans and their families, and my blood boils when I see excuses coming from our governor. It's downright embarrassing that we have a governor who blames everyone but himself. Excuses won't bring our veterans back.
Leslie Lim also isn't satisfied. She gets emotional thinking about her dad, a Korean War veteran, dying alone and without the morphine that he had been prescribed because the home did not have any.
He suffered for the last hours of his life trying to breathe. There's nothing worse than that. Choking on his phlegm and all alone. I mean, no one deserves that. No one. For Governor Pritzker to just keep passing this and blaming everybody, take hold of something and get the thing done right, the way it should be done. Step up.
Lim is one of 27 families that is suing the state over this. She says that she wants Pritzker to acknowledge the administration's mistakes, and only then will she be able to properly grieve. She also says it is incumbent on the administration to get it right, especially after Legionnaires and all of that issue. She says it has to be corrected in the future. The attorney who is representing Lam and the other families says there has been no update in negotiations with the state since those lawsuits were filed in March. With that, back to you.
Very sobering report. Thanks, Amanda. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
In Paris, for the longest time, weather forecasters' only eyes on Lake Michigan were ship captains. Today, technology makes real-time monitoring possible. A program co-managed by University of Illinois and Purdue University has applied data tracking technology to buoys floating in Lake Michigan, and the group just added a new one to the mix, nicknamed Chewy. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more. This one's going to be good, Patty. So before Chewy joined the team, that program that we mentioned, the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant, already had a pair of buoys, one by Wilmette and another by Michigan City. And that's in addition to another pair that the group overseas had for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Why add Chewy to the mix?
Well, you know, as all Chicagoans can attest, the city has its own microclimate. So a buoy in the middle of Lake Michigan, or even one that's a couple miles in either direction of the city, is not going to provide an accurate depiction of what's going on in Lake Michigan right off our shores. So Chewy, being just like about 1.25 miles off of Navy Pier, is going to give, you know, that real accurate picture of what the water conditions are like here.
And what does Chewy bring to the table, or should I say the lake?
Yeah, so the buoy will monitor things like air temperature and water temperature at the surface and at the bottom, things like wind speed, wind direction, and importantly, other things like wave height and something called wave period, which is the time between waves. So whether there's like slow swells or they're coming in rapid succession. And it also has a camera mounted on it and takes photographs and video, which people can access.
Oh, wow, that should be interesting. So who can make use of this data?
So anyone and everyone. Meteorologists are going to use it to with their forecasts. So they'll be able to know, if they need to issue something like a small craft advisory or a beach warning. Researchers can use it. You or I, anybody in the public can access this information. And it's especially important, a really important safety tool for swimmers and boaters. Especially because of that camera, they'll be able to see if there are hazardous conditions on the water, and things like that wave period that I mentioned. That can be one of the most hazardous conditions for swimmers because it can really pummel folks even if the wave heights aren't that high. So they'll have a really good picture of what those conditions are before they decide to head to the water.
Okay, so look to Chewy for information. Patty Watley, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Up next, we check back in with Joanna in Old Town. But first, a look at some events happening this weekend.
And now we check back in with Joanna, who spent the day in Old Town as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Thanks, Barris. We're now here with Scott Early, past president and life member of the Old Town Triangle Association. Thank you for joining us. I learned today that you've been living here for about 44 years, you said?
That's correct.
Long time.
It is.
So now I want to ask you, briefly paint a picture for us about your organization's work here in Old Town.
Well, the Old Town Triangle Association is like many neighborhood organizations, and it provides all kinds of functions. What distinguishes Old Town is two things. One, we have aided strongly in preserving Old Town as a designated historic district, to preserve the homes that were built after the Chicago fire, to preserve the neighborhood as it was. And two, we've instituted the Old Town Art Fair, always the second weekend in June. It's now been judged one of the best art fairs in America. 225 artists nationwide come in, and the proceeds from that not only go to the Triangle Association, but in large part also to the Menominee Club for Boys and Girls, which started in a former bowling alley on the corner of Willow, just west of here, and will now transfer virtually all of its operations into its River North complex, which serves over 1,500 school-age boys and girls and everything from basketball to gardening.
Now, you briefly touched on how it's been preserving these historic buildings in the area. Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Well, certainly. In the Old Town Triangle District, you'll have homes that range from Victorians built right after the fire, 1872, 1873. Then there was a city ordinance that prohibited wood construction. And so you see a lot of the stone buildings that people consider those old Edwardians, et cetera. And then when that restriction was revoked, you started getting new buildings again, Queen Anne's, et cetera. On Lincoln Park West, there's Louis Sullivan row houses. So there's a congregation of architectural history of Chicago, much like the whole city itself, contained in the one pocket of the Triangle neighborhood.
So a lot of beautiful architecture here in the area. Now, I do want to ask you about this famous art fair. We talked briefly also at this area, there was a lot of hippies.
Yeah. Old Town actually back in the 60s was very famous for that. I mean, you went to Second City, you went to the Earl of Old Town across the street beforehand, and it was a very liberal area. And there was a large artist community right there on Wells in the Curly Court complex. As you got later on and it became more of a residential neighborhood, the Triangle Association Historic District preserved those aspects of the old neighborhoods. So you actually can feel like you're walking in the past. You don't see the long hair and the beards, but you do see the houses.
And briefly, really quickly, I want to ask you this last question. For the newcomers who are coming into the area, what is something that you would like to tell them about what this neighborhood was or what it still is?
It's truly a neighborhood. People come in here as we did to stay and raise their kids, people stay as old seniors like we are now. It's truly a neighborhood. You do feel like you're in a pocket in the middle of the city, and it's quite wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that is all that we have here from Old Town for our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. I send it back to you.
A lot of great history there. Thanks, Joanna. And back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Weekend Review. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.
Next time on the Great Chicago Quiz Show. Are you ready?
I am.
Hi, I'm so happy to be